Are you really prepared to be a freelancer or consultant? Have you really thought this through? If you want to do this full time, then you need to have 6 to 12 months of expenses. But Eugene, you say, I'm doing this so I can get that money. I need to be a world famous consultant so I can have that money. Well, if that's the case, maybe you should stick to moonlighting. Freelance on nights and weekends until you're ready. If you don't have 6 months of expenses lined up for the full time jump, you're heading for disaster. Lead generation takes time. As we'll see when we talk about the consultant life cycle, sometimes that pipeline from marketing to qualified lead to sales to contract to payment can be very long. If you're coming in from a cold start with no network, assume that it will take 6 months of marketing and sales for you to start really gaining some traction. Are you okay with that? Consulting work, in my experience, is cyclical. It's feast or famine. Part of that is when you're feasting, you're too busy doing the work to spend time planting seeds for that next feast. No one makes time for marketing when a project is on fire and a customer is breathing down your neck. Part of it is often the work comes in big projects that when they're done, they're gone. Sometimes it's business cycles. It's rare that I get any work in November and December because no one wants to sign a new project around the holidays. Everyone's busy on vacation. Payments are slow. If you expect to get paid quickly, you are naive. Net 30 payment terms, so 30 days from invoice to payment, is the business standard in the United States. If you buy something from Amazon, you have to pay right then and there. This is called due on receipt or cash on delivery. Although in the case of Amazon, it's cash before delivery. But if you do work for a business, they will put in the contract that they only have to pay you 30 days after you invoice them. Longer if they ignore you, or if the payment terms say we can do 120 days. Some customers will demand 120 days. If they do that, I'm going to be charging an extra 20%. And you have almost no legal recourse if your customers drag their feet. You ideally have a contract, and in theory, you could sue, but the customer can always decide to try and screw you over. And many times it's not worth it. Are you really going to potentially spend $10,000 in lawyer's fees to recoup $1,000? I once did $2,500 worth of work for a guy in Germany without securing a contract first because it was urgent. And when it came time to pay, he ghosted me and I felt like an idiot. If this was the US and we had a contract, I could at least send him collections. But in many cases, you do not have the power in this relationship. Speaking of which, stop watching this video, hit pause, close the tab, I don't care, and watch this other video instead. FU, Pay Me, by Mike Montanaro is a classic, and it shows how a freelancer or consultant can get screwed over by a potential customer. It covers all these different scenarios, and it shows how important it is to have a contract and a lawyer. Now, for me, thankfully, bad customers have been rare, but I really recommend watching this video. It's hilarious, but based on the title, it is filled with profanities and vulgarities, so do be aware. Another reason you want that money is sometimes life happens. This is a picture of black mold from my basement. About a year and a half into working for myself, my basement started flooding. And this was really anxiety inducing because I had a tenant living in my basement. We found some contractors, hired them to install a French drain inside the basement, and they started tearing up the drywall. And guess what they found? Black mold. This ended up costing me about $12,000 to $15,000 total to remediate. It wiped out our savings because we had to pay for the French drain. My water heater broke, and then we had to get the black mold remediated. And then they put concrete and put up drywall and all this stuff. As someone who hates debt, it was so embarrassing to take a loan from QuickBooks because I couldn't do it from my bank because I didn't have any proof of income, and from my sister. This was a real low point for me. I made the leap with only about 3 to 5 months of expenses because I was making about $2,000 per month from Pluralsight at the time. And I thought, well, this will cover my mortgage. I'll be okay. And I really should have gotten a different job and built up my savings. But I hated my job. I felt worn out. I didn't think any other tech job was going to be better. And so I just hit the eject button. So you really have to be careful. Are you just trying to hit the eject button, or are you ready? And you may think that you know your current expenses. I mean, you better, if you plan to make the leap, you better have a full budget. But there are many expenses you might not be anticipating. Because I live in the United States, I pay $900 a month for me and my spouse's health insurance. If you are lucky, you have a partner who can provide health insurance, or you live in a country with universal health care. But even, say, a country like Sweden, it's not uncommon for people to pay for private health insurance on top of that. My health care costs more than my mortgage. So just think about that. Next, you will want business insurance. Specifically, you'll want errors and omissions or malpractice insurance in case you screw up on the job. And then you'll want general liability. I pay about $100 a month or so for mine from Hiscox Insurance, but you can get it cheaper. I get more than I need. There's also a bunch of software that you might need. If you're just starting, your operating expenses should be very, very low. You might only need $10 a month for Power BI Pro, but I pay for Office 365, a domain, a business website, QuickBooks for accounting, Toggle for time tracking, Calendly for scheduling. It goes on and on. It can easily add up. But starting out, you should be able to keep your operating expenses fairly low. Finally, I pay about $300 per month for an accounting firm to handle my taxes and answer accounting questions. When you're starting out, it's perfectly fine the first year to just do your own taxes and use a Schedule C form in the United States. There's other expenses that I've not listed here, but just do your homework. Next, do you have a professional network? Do you have an established professional network? If the answer is no, I don't think you should go full time. Your best source of high quality leads are your professional friends and colleagues. Hiring a consultant requires a lot of trust and confidence in their capabilities. Referrals from a professional network are high trust. If someone makes a personal recommendation for you, your odds of closing that deal increases exponentially. People help those people that they like. The key to being likable is to be friendly, relatable, and not be a jackass. People don't like strangers because they don't know strangers. Imagine walking down a busy city street. Out of the 100 strangers, how many do you like? Probably none of them. Unless you have the personality of a golden retriever, that is. Relationships, therefore, are key. A significant amount of my work came from handoffs from peers. Another consultant would have a customer request that they couldn't fulfill or didn't want to fulfill, and they'd pass off the customer to me. Some consultants charge a referral fee here, but if they are a friend, they would often rather bank a future favor from you or get paid in warm fuzzies than collect $200 today. And so I've never had anyone ask me for a referral fee. In addition to sales, your peer network is your best source of help when you get stuck on a problem. I regularly run into problems that I don't know how to solve, but I have probably 100 colleagues that I would feel comfortable sending a direct message to see, hey, do you know the answer to this? Can you help? And because we have a relationship, they know they can do the same, and they do. My professional network is large because I've been attending and presenting at conferences for a decade now. You don't need 100 colleagues, but if you don't have a handful of people that you can reach out to, you're probably not ready. This is easily 30% of the justification for my high hourly rate. I don't get paid to know answers. I get paid to be able to find the answer and implement it. This means having friends that I can reach out to, and it means knowing how to Google effectively and troubleshoot effectively. So, what skills do you need to consult? Everyone obsesses about the technical skills. And yes, that's part of it. Yes, you need to know how to solve the problems presented to you, but you really only need to be one step ahead of the customer. My first consulting job was a SQL Server health check. I was super nervous. I downloaded a bunch of diagnostic scripts, and guess what I found? It was a dumpster fire. They were doing full database backups, 30 gigabytes of backups every 30 minutes. Then they were doing transaction log backups, just the changes, the minute by minute changes once at night. This was completely backwards from best practices. I showed them the issue, I showed them how to turn on backup compression, and they saw a 10x improvement in backup size. I looked like a hero. You just have to be one step ahead. You don't need expertise in an absolute sense. You need it in a relative sense to your customer. And you need comfort with researching answers for things you don't know. Just important as the technical skills are the people skills. It is rare that the most technically competent person makes the best consultant, in the same way that the most technically competent person is often the worst educator and trainer. My boss once told me that consulting is the art of calling someone an idiot and having them say thank you. Too many people in our field are good at the former, but not at the latter. Too many people are good at pushing advice, but not successfully giving advice and having that advice received. In addition to people skills, you need some business sense. I came out of college with none of this, which of course made it difficult to work in business intelligence. In my first job at Bayer Material Science, I was confused by terms like debit memo and credit memo. Not a good look. Finally, you need a lot of self-discipline and restraint. If you struggled with working at home, assume that self-employment will be 3 times as difficult as that sort of transition. The self-management part shocked me, in part because I had to learn both. I had to learn how to work from home and work for myself. And so the first 3 months I was doing weird hacks to be productive. I would put on work clothes at home just to be able to focus. As far as people skills go, I might as well have been raised by wolves. A lot of my family were either very stoked Germans or Poles, and my father was an electrical engineer. So feelings and emotions were verboten. They were not something that we talked about. The way that my German grandpa showed me love and affection was having me pour concrete and dig ditches in the garden and building a shed. I certainly felt cared for and loved, but it did not prepare me for the workplace and it did not prepare me for consulting. So in my 20s, I read a lot of books. First is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a bit cheesy and common sense, but I wasn't born with any common sense, so I needed explicit instruction. How to Win Friends at the end of the day is a guide to be more likable. The more likable you are, the more quickly you can build a rapport with your customer, and the more easily you can expand your professional network. Again, people help people they like. Next, How to Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People is the cheesiest book title I've ever heard. And recall, I just recommended a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. But this book was essential for me to understand the value of small talk, the value of being a conversationalist. It helped me understand that small things like getting a name right or being early are how we show people that we value them. And it gave me the most valuable consulting trick that I have ever read. Repeat back what the customer said to make sure you heard them correctly. This habit alone has probably saved a project or two from going off the rails because it's so much easier to fix a misunderstanding in a sales meeting before anyone signed a contract than it is 30 hours in. Next, if you want to quit your job because of office politics, I have bad news for you. Politics never go away, but crucial conversations can help you manage heated conversations and de-escalate when a project goes sideways or there's inherent misunderstandings going on. Finally, The Secrets of Consulting is an older and kind of goofy book. Consulting is ultimately a paradox. You have to persuade people that you have no control over to take your advice. And oftentimes, people are paying you for the privilege of ignoring you and the advice you give, and just need to be able to say, well, we asked a consultant, we got some advice. This book is full of fun sayings and parables and aphorisms and all this kind of stuff. So it's a nice lateral thinking kind of book. So I highly recommend it. How do you build business sense? Well, there's a ton of books on the subject, I suppose, but this one is my favorite for a few reasons. First, it's aimed at IT professionals, perfect for you. It also helped me realize that half of all accounting is made up. It's just an industrial strength label gun for financial transactions. I ran into this problem as a business owner. I would make 2 bank transfers to myself from my business account to my personal account each month. One was for Eugene, the employee, and one was for Eugene, the business owner. And how did anyone know which was which? They didn't. Aside from whatever label I applied to the transaction at the end of the year and then told the IRS. It was all just a label gun. Finally, this book helped me as a business intelligence developer in general. It explained very common financial reports in a way that made sense and made me better at business intelligence. Finally, a few scattered considerations. Did you sign a non-compete at your current workplace? And is it enforceable? Ideally, you might be able to carry over some potential customers. Non-ideally, they can sue you and make your life miserable even if it isn't enforceable. Be prepared to spend at least $300 asking a lawyer questions about your current employment contract based on my past experience. Some states like California, non-competes aren't enforceable, and even if they were, they're a red pen jurisdiction where they will toss out the entire employment contract if part of it's invalid. Meanwhile, in Ohio, it is a blue pencil state and will rewrite and modify the contract down until it becomes enforceable. Next, do you have a target market in mind? If your furnace breaks, do you search for a random handy person or you search for a local heating and cooling company that specializes in this and does it 100 times per month? I know which one I would look for. Having a niche not only helps with marketing, but allows for word of mouth, which is easier to pass along. Oh, Jamie works with Power BI, you should hire them. Or Jamie specializes in Power BI reporting for healthcare, and they're very familiar with the Epic system for electronic digital records. You tell me. Have you considered the loneliness that's involved? I found that my friends and family have trouble understanding what I do. Some assume, like my mom, that I'm always free. I remember that in the year 2022, I was complaining about having to work so hard to my friends. I said, "Hey, I'm really struggling. I'm doing 30 hours of billable work each week." I remember one of them saying, "Eugene, that's a normal work week." I had to gently explain that this 30 hours of billable work meant that I was actually working 50 to 60 hours per week in that situation. If at all possible, find peers who are doing the same thing as you and form a mastermind group or a peer group. This has been a lifeline for me throughout this journey. Finally, make sure that you have a separate office, a separate workspace, a separate computer. My first year, I didn't have a lot of money, so my gaming computer was my work computer. And as you might imagine, that was not good for work-life balance, and it was not good for my mental health. Lastly, if you want kind of a comprehensive checklist, check out Million Dollar Consulting. The version I read was a lot older. It was called Getting Started in Consulting back in 2015, and it was hugely helpful for thinking through all of the logistics involved. I can't recommend it enough.